Hi, I'm Jeremiš Drunkiewicz, and this is the first edition of my C Sharp training. I've prepared this training for my team at my company, but I decided to actually publish this on YouTube so that maybe together we can make this a bit better. So I'll be really happy to get any comments, even if I make a mistake or say something that's just stupid. So yeah, we're going to start with some really basics about C Sharp, and of course I'm not an expert. I actually learned everything by myself. So please just don't really troll me or something. Yeah. Okay. Second thing, I am actually using Windows 10, so my windows look a bit weird. I mean, well, I'm getting used to this. So whatever I do, just get used to what my windows look like. Yeah. Uh, but whenever I'll actually try to make something fancy, I'll tell you. And second of all, I've downloaded Visual Studio uh, 2013 for Windows Desktop. It's an Express edition. It's for free. You can just get it and start doing whatever we're doing here with this training. So we'll just jump into the training and start our new project. Yeah, so let's jump into our first project. Uh, just let me maximize this. Yeah, okay, so we have the new project option on the start pane here on the left. So we click the new project. Now, Visual Studio allows you to actually program in several different languages like Visual Basic or C++, but this is a C Sharp training, so we're just going to choose C Sharp. Now, the second thing, uh, you might notice, depending on your Visual Studio, you might have multiple choices here. Now, we're going to start with a simple console application, so that'll be a blank dark screen that will just put text on it in white, right? Yeah, but this will allow us to actually learn the basics of C Sharp and see what the language is about and how to work with it. Okay, so let's just choose for now the console application. Now, just some best practices about programming and about just organizing your things. The first thing you want to do is to name your application. Uh, make it something that is actually meaningful for you, meaningful for people that will read it later on after you. Maybe they'll continue your work, maybe they'll just review it, or maybe they want to change something or fix it. So make it something useful. For now, we'll just call it the basics. Okay. Now I called it. That's my project name. Yes. Now the second thing I want to do is put all my files in a specific folder. Now I already prepared a WPF training, which will actually be a bit later on, but I decided to actually begin with just the basics. That's why I'll just create a new one somewhere on my C drive. I'll just create a folder and I'll type C as training source. Yep, that should be enough. Okay, now I click select folder. So I created a new folder for my all my training files and stuff. Yep, training source. And now, theoretically, because there is a solution name. Solution is a grouping or a bag of projects. You might imagine a bag where you just open it and you can see, oh, there is like 3 or 4 projects in it. So the solution name might be the same as the project name because, well, the solution just contains a single project. But it might be that you just want to have a different name, and I want to have a different name. I'll call it CS training, because the basics is just one part of the training, and there'll be probably more projects within the training later on. So I'll just name my solution, which is, as I said, a group of projects, or yeah, a group of projects, yeah. And it might need a name, right? Now, there is a few buttons here. So, yeah, I want to create a directory for my solution because I want to have this organized. So that, let's just imagine that this is a source folder for all my projects or my solutions. And if I just put all the files there without creating separate directories for each project, each solution, and it's going to be a mess. And from time to time, maybe I'll name my files the same, I mean, as in a different project, and then they'll just keep on overwriting each other, so it's a mess. So it's best to actually keep this checked, unless you actually know what you're doing and you just want a specific folder and you know what you're doing. So then you just can uncheck that one, and then your solution name is blanked out. So yeah, but we just want to go with this default. Come on, I wanted a CS training. All right, okay, so we have the project named the Basics, and we have the solution name CS training. We're going to go with this solution for quite a bit. Yeah, and everything is stored somewhere on my C drive in CS training source. Okay, so while Visual Studio prepares our project, oh, it already did. Well, what I wanted to tell you, and give me a little break. Hopefully this was actually less than a second. I don't know. We'll see later on. As you can see, your Visual Studio might have tabs somewhere on your right and somewhere on your left, but I cleared all those. And you know why? Because sometimes you just like click the X button and everything disappears, and then you don't know, where are my stuff? There used to be something, a panel here or something, and then you don't have it, and you can't just work with this. So let's just say I have this blank Visual Studio, and which I can't work with, and I'll just try to configure it so that I can work with. So first of all, I go to my view, and what I need is a solution explorer. Now it went to my second screen because I used to have it on my second screen, but here is a solution explorer. Yep, and by default it goes somewhere here, somewhere on the right. So that's somewhere, that's something that is by default. Okay, so what do we have in this solution explorer actually? Well, we have our solution. As I said, I want to call it CS training, not just as my project, because I'll have a couple of the projects here. So there'll be the basics, and then so on, so on, so on. So I called it differently, and here's my solution, and here is my first project. As you can see, the Visual Studio created a couple of things here. So we have some properties, we have some references, we have an app config. Oh, it actually got viewed even. Cool. And finally, we have our program CS. Yay! That's the thing that we're actually going to work with. Now, I am going to talk about the other stuff within this Solution Explorer when we're actually going to work with these. But Solution Explorer is something that you'll actually really need because, well, you'll be accessing your files and doing some configuration here. Okay, so let's just open this CS file, so the program CS, which Visual Studio created for us, and let's figure out what it does, what it's by default, and start actually thinking about like learning some C#. One thing I'll do, I'll move this to my second monitor because I like to have my code like all the way here and my Solution Explorer not messing up with everything else. So I'll just have it somewhere on the side. So the first thing I want to teach you is, well, some data that we can hold within our program. I'm not going to describe all the things that were pre-generated, although, well, you should get to know, but we'll just go really slow from the very basics. So whenever you start programming, what you want to have is some information in your program and then somehow manipulate it according to what the user actually does. So the first thing that you might want to have is some numerical data. Now I've prepared some code here. Hopefully it will show. Yeah, it shows nicely. Very nice. Okay, so I've prepared some numerical data. Well, this is not all the data that we can have. I'm not using the word type yet because I'm going to describe that a bit later. So we have the integer data, so the whole numbers called ints from integer, right? And we have the floating point numbers called float. And we have the floating point numbers called double. And you might wonder, why do we have actually two kinds of floating point numbers? Now, the difference is in precision. So imagine that you have a value 2 point something like this, and this is not true, but imagine that a floating point number just cuts it in half, more or less, right? And then the double keeps the precision as it is. That's more or less. And yeah, I use the Polish signing. It should be a dot here, right? Okay, but I hope you understand. If not, please leave a comment. Okay, so we have a float value, a double value, and an integer value, which is a whole number, right? And, well, what we want to do is somehow assign a value to it. So how we do it? Well, we just, first of all, type the name of that, what we want to type. And, yeah, thanks. I wanted that. And Visual Studio will try to help us as much as it can. So whenever you type something, it will try to figure out what you're trying to type and then let you know with this cool hint. Sometimes you need to actually type a few more words and the list will get a bit smaller, but if you just type a single letter, then you'll get the whole list of all available stuff that you can use, right? So if you see me programming, I'll actually type a few letters and then use the values or use arrow keys, as you can see. Use arrow keys to actually get the variable or the thing that I want to use, right? Okay, so I want to assign an integer value. Okay, that's great. So I have an integer value, and to assign anything to it, I'll just use the equation sign, right? So my integer value is equal to, and then I can put any integer value. So let's say it's equal to 15, right? That's okay. Okay, let's assign something to a float value. So I'll go float, and we have the float value, and we are assigning. We can assign a 15 to it. That's okay, right? But that's still actually an integer, right? And I said it holds floating point values. So let's go with the float value and just assign something else to it, like 245. Yeah. And I said it can hold floating point value. Why is there an error? Well, because what I wrote here is a double value, actually. I need to denote it that it's a float. And to do so, I need to put an F on the end. And then I actually denoted a floating point value, which here in the pop-up is called single. And that's the actually the most common name of this type. Yeah. And of course we have the double value, which we can assign our 15.245 just as is, right? So there is a difference between these two, and most of this difference is in the precision. And of course there is this slight problem or difference, that when just assigning a value that we just type in, that whenever we type a float, we actually need to put this F at the end of that float. Moving on to the next data, we might want to have some text in our application. So text data, right? And well, most text is composed of multiple characters, and these are called strings. So we'll denote a string value, right? But of course, if you really want to denote a single character, you actually can, and you have a character value. Which you can use, right? So we have both of these. Now the difference between assigning values to these is, well, you'll see in a second. So let's just assign a value to our string value. So for a string value, we put this value in this double quotation mark, in the quotation mark. I have no idea how to call this in English. Whatever. Yeah, but this double thing, right? And then you can put any string. So hello world, let's say, right? That's what they do. I mean, in most of the tutorials. Yeah. And then if we want to assign a value to a character value, so character value, right? And we need to put that in the single quotation mark, right? And then we can only put a single character there. I mean, if we put more characters, it will actually make an error, right? Too many characters in each character literal, right? So we can put a single character there, right? Well, there are some exceptions there. I mean, I can put 2 slashes there, and it's okay. Even though you think it's 2 characters, but it's actually a single one. But I'll get to that later on. So we can put a single character in the text data character value. Now, there are more complex things than just numerical data and text data. But let's just focus on one thing, and let me just clear out these just for a sec. So we have the numerical data and text data. Great. Okay, now there is one concept that you need to learn before you actually progress, and this is the concept of a data type. Now, a type just denotes what kind of information resides or is concealed or is within something. Here it's a variable, but sometimes it's a bigger container, right? So a data type defines what information is within something that you name, right? So that's what something that's I really want you to note down, note down, right? So int denotes an integer data type, so that it holds. I'm sorry. So that it holds an integer value, right? A float denotes a data type, so that our variable named float value holds a floating point value of a lower precision, right? And so on, right? So I hope you understand this. Now, some of you might say, like, okay, what is this different from, say, Pascal? Yeah, okay, but this course is not for people that actually ever programmed. So, well, yeah, it is different. So, let's just jump back to the beginnings and say, okay, what is C# actually? C# is an object-oriented programming language. That's a big word. Okay, what does it mean, object-oriented? Well, it means that, first of all, you can use and you should use objects. Well, what does it mean to use objects? Well, it means that, okay, first of all, you describe them and then you use them. That's more or less what an object-oriented language is. So, because you use an object-oriented language, you have objects, you describe them, and then you use them. Okay, so let me give you an example of an object. It's a simple object. It's a car. Okay, so what can a car do? I'm just going to actually try to actually do stuff here. Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, it's PowerPoint. Yeah. Not something. Oh, yeah, I can type. Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So, what can a car have? I mean, things, physical things. So, a car can have tires. Yeah, right. It can have a tire. Yeah, it can have like windshield. Right. Yeah, it can have a windshield. Yeah, it can have like front lights. Right. It can have an engine. Right. Okay. Yeah. A fuel tank. Okay, this is what a car, from just what I can think of, a car might have, right? Okay, now let's just think about what what are the properties that a car might have. So a car might have a color, right? A car might have a window tint, right? Yeah. A car might have a tank or fuel tank capacity, right? Um, fuel level, right? Um, yeah, it can have a velocity if it's moving, right? So these are some properties. So these are the elements of a car. So the things that it is built of. Of course, I didn't actually put all the parts of a car, right? I just mentioned a few, right? And then these are the properties. So what describes this particular car made of those parts, right? And also additional properties specific to something that is a car, right? So for example, like velocity, right? We can add direction, right? So the like north, south, east, west. So where is this car heading, right? We can have direction, something like this, right? Okay, but the car can actually do something, right? So, and we can make it do something. So we can start a car. Actually, we can start the engine. So I'll just write start engine, right? And we can accelerate, right? We can brake. Um, turn on headlights, right? Okay, things we can do with the car, right? Okay, so now I made a kind of a description of a car. Like, okay, we have like the parts of the car, right? So how what we need to have to make a car, right? And some properties, right? So that like the window tint here is like bluish and the color is green, right? And we can make the fuel capacity a bit more, right? And we can fill the tank up, and then we have the fuel level. When we start the car and we start accelerating, then it has a certain velocity and it moves in a certain direction, right? So these are the properties of the car that might change in certain circumstances, right? And then finally, we have things that we can do with the car, right? So that more or less depends on our imagination, of course, defines a car, right? So now coming back to our C sharp. So what is an object-oriented language? Well, it's a language where objects interact with each other. It's a language where we actually define some properties, some parts from which objects are created of, and we define things that we can do with these objects so that we can make those objects interact with each other or make the user interact with the objects, right? So that's the power of an object-oriented language. We'll get to know more detail in a second, but just this brief introduction into this language, I think it's needed. Okay, let's jump straight into an example. So we want to have a person described because, well, a lot of applications just have a bunch of users, and uh, I call them users, but let's just call them person so that they have personality. They're treated right. Okay, so to start actually describing an object, we actually have to tell the program how it looks like, and to do so, we need to define a class, and class needs a name, so we'll just call it person. Oh, come on, yeah, very nice. Okay, so I want to describe what a person is to me so that my program knows what a person is, because the program just uses simple information to actually interact with one another, right? Okay, so what might a person have? I would say a name, right? I'm not going to go with. Let's just go with this. So it might have a first name, right? And I use the string, right? Because a first name is a text data, right? So it's a kind of a text data. It has a last name, so last name, great. Okay, might have a gender. Now, I would love to have something to actually say like, okay, male or female, and not being a text. But okay, we don't have this technology yet, so we'll stay with a string. And let's just say a person might have an age, and let me make this an int. And some of you might say like, yeah, I'm 18 and a half. Or even to get a beer, you're saying like, uh, like there's one day till I get 18. So it's like I'm 17.99, whatever. Yeah. No. Here my age will be just an int, so either you're 18 or not. Whatever. So I've described a person, right? Now, whenever I talk about a class, yeah, and I'm just going to go a bit more in a technical language. Whenever I talk about a class, I'm talking about a blueprint. So I'm talking about how to make this kind of object. So here we have a person which has a first name, last name, and a gender, and an age. Yeah. Now, again, we used types, right? The ones that we learned. So the first name is a string. So it's a text value. It's multiple characters. And for now, let's say unlimited length. And then last name the same thing, gender the same thing, and age, let's say unlimited whole number. Every time I say unlimited, it's false, but just don't worry. Don't worry. Nobody lives that long, and nobody has a first or last name that long to actually cover the limit. I'll talk about limitations later on. So we've described the basic parts, and I want to call those parts of a person, because let's just go back to our car example. I'm sorry. Yeah. So these are just parts. It might be that these are properties of a person. These mix up, because at some point you will actually figure out that, okay, let's just put these together, right? Because these all are actually properties. But in some circumstances, you want to distinguish parts that the thing is made of and the properties themselves. So here I actually defined the properties. I don't have any legs, chests, kidneys, liver, right? So these would be the parts. Right? I just have properties. So first name, last name, gender, age, right? Okay. Still, okay. This is just a blueprint. If this stayed like this, our program wouldn't be able to actually interact with this object. So, how can we actually interact with this object? Well, there's another thing that you need to note down, and please do. The instance of an object. Now, the instance of an object is the actual object. So, whenever someone designs a car, right, it's just a design. But when it gets built and you can buy it, then it means that you get an instance of a car, right? You get a Ferrari, for example, right? Well, this one's not a Ferrari. I know. That's why I got this one, because just a car. It's not cool. It looks cool. Yeah, whatever. I like this one. It's a small compact car. Whatever. Yeah. So if you really want objects to interact with each other, you actually use their instances. So they're physical uh, objects. I mean, in code, in the program, they actually start existing, right? Just imagine that, okay, when you create the description, you just have the idea of the object, but when you want to use it, you need to instantiate it so that you can use it. So you make it physical to the program. Yeah. So to actually get an object come to exist, as I already said, we need to instantiate it. And we have the blueprint and the name. So we use that type. So person, come on. Yeah. And we need a variable name, a variable that will hold the information about our person. Let's just call it Bob. Cool. So now we've already created, we've just created Bob, who is a person. Yeah. Although it is actually empty. I mean, it doesn't contain any information. And what I mean about this is, okay, every time we wanted to assign a value to our variables, for example, integer, we said we want it to be equal to 15, and so on with the floating point values, and then we had some strings and char data, right? So we also would like to assign some information to our person. And well, if we just say like Bob equals, Bob, doesn't make sense, right? Because, well, okay, Bob is a more complex. Well, Bob has it contains more information than just a simple data type, and well, before I actually get into doing so, filling up some information about our person, I want to come back and give you some background on what actually is the value before we actually assign it. Because, okay, you might imagine that you have created an object, so you instantiated it, you declared it, right? I want to call those declarations. I think I've already said that, but yeah. So I declared that I want to use these variables, right? And I gave them some types, but I didn't assign any values, and you can see this green wiggly underline that Visual Studio actually says like, okay, you've declared something, but you never used it. This is actually quite useful because sometimes you just keep on declaring variables thinking that you might use them, then maybe you use them, then you delete some code, the code has 1,000 lines, you delete some part of it, and then you get like variables that just are left alone, never used. And well, then somebody else reads this 2 years later and thinks like, okay, what is this? Does he actually ever use it? Can I remove it? I mean, yeah. So this is actually very nice because if Visual Studio tells you that you never used it, you probably didn't. Yeah, you probably didn't. You might have. So just don't go like this. Never. Never go like this because it might break your program. Because Visual Studio is, well, it is wrong from time to time. Okay, so let's get to know what are the default values when we just declare our variables. And we'll come back to actually filling out some information about our Bob person, right? But now let's just figure out some values. And before we do that, we need to get to know how to actually, well, make our program do something, right? That would be cool. So let me just quickly, very, very quickly do a hello world program, right? Because, yeah, we should get a hello world program. That would be cool. Okay, so I said our program is a console program, right? So it will be a dark blank screen, blank and black, yeah, with some letters on it. In the beginning, there will be just no letters, and then afterwards, when our program starts running, there will be either some letters or no letters, depending on whether we want to have some text on it or not. Okay, so we're using a console. Why am I putting an L instead of an N? Console, right? So we're using a console, and this is another object. Well, this is for us might be an abstract thing, but just imagine, okay, that's this window that will appear when our program starts running. Now we can do stuff with it. So if I put a dot there, and for now, just imagine, okay, you have to put a dot, right? I'll tell you what the dot does, but just now, you need to put a dot. And you can do a whole bunch of stuff here, right? See? Okay, now we want to put text on it. So It is as simple as writing, okay, write stuff, right? No, we want to write stuff, right? And it's going to be a string, and I said already that text data, when we have multiple characters, come on, stop doing that. When we have multiple characters, we put them in those double quotation marks. Just let me call those double quotation marks. I have no idea how those are called. If you know, put that in comments. Thanks. Okay, yeah, and we'll just create a hello world program. Hello world. Yay. Okay. Now, okay, another thing. Okay, yeah, I've wrote a program that will just put hello world. And okay, how do I run it? I mean, yeah, I want my program to actually work. Where is the exe file or something? Yeah, how do I double click it or something? No. Okay, we need to build our program. So that the Visual Studio, the IDE, integrated development environment, IDE, right? Yeah, actually compiles the code, so reads it through and then makes it understandable for the computer, right? So we want to build our program, and just clicking build solution, well, yeah, it builds our program. And actually, let me show that, because before I'll actually go into debugging, I'll show you where our program is. So let's see our solution explorer. Yeah, here's the basics. Now, if I right click it, and there are properties, and they'll show somewhere. Okay, I didn't want that. No. Okay. Sorry, forget about that. I want the properties. Where? Properties window. Yeah. Hello. Very nice. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Here you have the properties window. So in the view, you might find additional things. And now this is something that is very, very needed. I mean, you want to have it, right? So what I do is I combine these together. I think most of the Visual Studio things, distributions, allow you to do that. Most of them. I mean, 2008 even actually allows that. You can combine these two floating windows, and you can put them together like this, and then have a single window, yeah, with now two panels with stuff on it, right? Okay, so I wanted these properties, and okay, I click my project, and then if I forgot where I saved it, I can go to the properties and then just get this project folder and copy it, right? Copy it, and then open Windows Explorer, and I do it really fast with the Windows key and then E, right? So Windows E, and then I get to that folder, and now we have another view of our project. This is all the files that were created by Visual Studio, by us, so it's a combined work, right? But what I'm really interested in is the bin folder, right? And here I have the debug folder. Now, okay, the debug will hold an exe file, right? Yeah. So I can start this program, and it does something, right? Okay, you didn't see anything, it blinked, don't worry. Now, there is another folder, and it will be there when we actually publish the application at some point. Normally, when you have the full version of Visual Studio, so the professional one or something, the build will have an option to actually build both the debug and then the release and all others if you create them, right? But here we just need to change to release. I'll get into that later on, but when you change to release, you might need to wait for some time, but then you go either build or rebuild the solution. And then when you come back to the folder, and you'll have another one called release. And then there is the exe file, right, which you can run. And it's still blinked, so you couldn't see how it works, but you'll see in a second, don't worry. Okay, I'll move this, and now let's come back to our code, and we'll switch back to debug. And okay, it would be really useless if we just had to go on running the application with the exe file and then seeing what's the results and not having the ability to interact or stop our program at some point to be able to actually get into some small details of our program. That will be hard to actually do anything. So what we can do is we can do a slow run or a factory run. It's called debugging, right? Although at the moment it might seem that our program is bug free, right? But still, what we are doing is looking into its core runtime, whatever. Yeah. So what we want to do is just go and debug it. So we can go start debugging. The short, the key shortcut is F5, right? And what I want to tell you is, okay, sometimes the debugger crashes and just fails to start running, and you might get upset and yeah, why isn't my debugger not working? Well, it's something to do with Windows and how Visual Studio works, and it's just so complex I actually don't understand it. But I've already figured out a solution for that. So first of all, when we open the task manager, yeah, and yeah, when you open it in Windows 7 and lower, you have something different. But what you're interested in is the process list. This is not a process list. This is running apps list. Actually, Windows 10 made it a bit weird. But then, when you go to details, you actually have the running processes, right? And at some point, I called my project the Basics, and my solution CS training. So it's either under T, the Basics, yeah. Oh, here it is. Okay. Now you can see there is a process running, which is called the Basics vs host.exe. Now this is a process that will be running all the time because this is the debugging environment. So our program, when it starts running, it is enclosed by an additional environment that allows Visual Studio to interact with the program and be able to actually get to know some stuff that is inside, stop the program, and so on, right? So whenever your debugging stops working for some reason, usually unknown, just kill the process. You right click it, just find the one that is your project, because there might be more and they might be actually useful for you, right? As you can see, there are like additional hosts that are doing other stuff, right? So just kill this one, right? Just go end task, yep. It'll disappear and reappear, and when it reappears, that's good, because now it should be running again, right? If this doesn't work, just restart your computer. It should work, right? Okay. So we want to go debugging, right? So we just either click this start, we go debugging, debug, and then start debugging, F5, right? Or we hit F5, right? But if for some reasons you are unable to debug and you still want just to run the program and see how it looks like, how it works, and you don't want to restart your computer and stuff, and I don't know, yeah, you can go on running the program without debug. So you can start without debugging, right? And then this will actually, what it will do is it will just go to your either release or debug folder and just run the exe, right? So these are some options to run your program from Visual Studio without actually getting to those folders and finding this, because it might just take some time, right? Okay, let's debug our program. So I'll just hit F5, and whenever I'll actually start up our program, I always just hit F5. I'm not going into those menus. I mean, not too often, right? So let's just hit F5. Now we've seen Visual Studio do something. It popped up some additional panels, and then something blinked and it disappeared. Right? Yeah, that was our program running, and what it did is it actually printed out "Hello World," and because we didn't have any other instructions, and my computer is quite fast, and it didn't have anything else to do, so it just stopped, right? So what we can do is we can ask our program to actually wait for any user input. So we can just say like, okay, console, read a key, read any key, whatever, read key, right? So this will mean that I can actually stop my program and wait for any user input. So when I run it, you can see, okay, here is my nice black window, right? I have the hello world here, right? And, well, it just stays there. I can close the program with an X, right? And then Visual Studio comes back to its previous state. But additionally, I can put like an A. You didn't see the A. Let's just put another read key so that you can see that. I can put an A. See? You can see an A, right? If I put another one, it turns off, right? Okay, so that's one way of making your program stop a bit. Now, read key might also consume this character, because sometimes you want the user to press a button and you don't want it to be displayed, right? So you have, let me just call it overloads. I'll be talking about overloads later on. But okay, we have two versions of this function, right? One is just how we use it, and the other one allows us to actually intercept, and I tend to call it consume the pressed character, pressed key, right? So yeah, I want it to consume it, so I'll just say true, right? And then let's just have two of these, right? And then I put an A, doesn't do anything. I put a second A, and it stops the program, right? So it consumes the character. So when you read my programs, you'll see this happening. Okay, so we have already learned some debugging, so we'll be able to actually get to know what is in our variables that we declared by default, right? Because we will be able to actually print them and actually have a program that is kind of running. Now, before I actually start printing the values of those variables, let me just show you another way or a feature that the debugger allow us to do. As I said, we can actually stop our program in the middle or at some point, and then be able to actually uh, peek inside it, right? Have a peek and see what is going on and what is its state and stuff, right? So what I can do is I can put something that's called a breakpoint. So you can see when I left click on this gray side on the left, right, you can see that I get this red dot. It's a big dot. It's actually a circle. And the line of code that actually will be evaluated gets highlighted in red as well. And now at this point, my program will stop its execution, because the running of the program is called an execution, right? It will stop its execution and allow the debugger to actually have a peek of what's going on in the program. So let's run the program now. Oh, okay. Yeah, I need to hit something, right? Because yeah, I had this line here, and so before my breakpoint, and you can see my breakpoint went down to this part because these were declarations, right? And even though I had my breakpoint put like here on this line, it went down to here because, well, this is the point where actually something happens. I mean, this is the next step that the program will have to do, because declaring variables is just something that reserving memory, right? And for the debugger, it's not considered an action, kind of. Yeah, whatever. So now we can actually have a peek inside our program. And now the first thing you'll notice, because I showed you this program, and I didn't actually look at what is going on with my Visual Studio. And as you can see, I have some default stuff here. I have my Solution Explorer, which I got rid of, right? And if I stop my program, as you can see, it disappears, right? Or when I run my program, right, hit an A, it reappears, right? So yeah, because Visual Studio has two default views, one is for just programming, one is for debugging, you can organize it, right? So again, I'll take my Solution Explorer, move it to my second monitor, because I don't want my Solution Explorer to actually kind of stay in a view. I don't need it when debugging. Now the second thing, what I have, and this is really useful, is the locals pane, or the locals panel. But let me just close it, because as I said, we tend to click X's because we want to see more of our code and stuff, and then when we actually want to use something, then, well, we can't find it. Now, I said that you can find a lot of stuff in the view here, but if you really go through all these, you won't see the locals, and then you'll get like really mad, because like, oh, where's my locals? I closed it and I can't find it, right? So yeah, they organized it in such a way that some things are actually in the debug, and then if you click the debug, then there is this windows, and then you can see breakpoints, output, stuff, and then you have locals. Cool, right? So what is locals? well, I'm not getting into too much details, but these are all the variables, all the objects that are currently visible to our program, more or less. So this is one way of having a peek on what our variables values are, right? So our integer value is 0, our float value is 0, our double value is 0, our string value is null, and that's not text, that's actually null. I'll talk about null in a second. Now, our character value is, I'll call it 0. It's the end of string character, actually. So it's 2 characters, but it's actually a single character. And I'll talk about that later on as well. And our bob is, as our string value, just null. Now, whenever we have our program in, I'll call it break mode, we can actually peek inside the values of our program in several different ways. One of them is actually hovering over a value. Come on, hover. Yeah, okay. Hello. And now you can see my integer value is 0. Maybe I'll zoom in. Come on, zoom in, please. Please zoom in. Try to do what I want you to do. Come on. Oh, you're so stupid. Okay, thank you. See? So I hope you see that. Okay, yeah, so you can hover above a value. You have this. Oh, you can edit it, but maybe that's something that we'll do later on. What you can do is actually you can, in some later versions of Visual Studio, you can actually pin this, and it makes it bigger even. Cool, very cool. And if I zoom in, oh, it makes it even bigger. Great. Didn't know that. Okay, so you can actually pin this, and then you can move it around, and then you'll see what's the value inside it whenever you break the code. Break. I mean, you put a breakpoint on the code, right? Yeah. Okay, let's just close this. Right? So you can peek any value. But that might be hard to do because sometimes your code is so complex and you just want to see what's the value of something bigger, right? And that's hard to do. What you can also do is right-click this variable, right-click this, and then go to this option here, which tells you to add this variable to something called watch. And then you get another pane, which is called watch 1. And then you have your variable and the value here. Now, let's just examine those two windows. These are actually, these have the same structure. They are called differently, but both locals and all watches have the same structure. So it's a table that has the variable name, the value, and what is very important is the type of that variable. Because, and we'll get into that at some point, sometimes we don't know what's the type of the variable, and we just want to see and have a peek, not at the value, but actually at the type of the variable, right? So something that we declare when we create the variable, right? So sometimes we just want to know what is the type, because sometimes we do declare a variable, which is an object, it's a complex object, and we're trying to examine its parts. So imagine a person with liver, hands, legs, chest, right? And we just want to examine what parts is it built of, and we have no idea, and we just like are peeking inside and see, oh, it has a liver. Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's a bit drastic. You wouldn't ever open a person unless you're working somewhere in a hospital or in the morgue, and you're just examining a dead person. Okay, so that's a few ways of how you can debug your program and see what is its insides, right? Okay, so going back to some cool stuff. So we'll stop our program, and to do so you just click stop debugging, this stop button. We'll get rid of that breakpoint because I don't like red. I mean, a string can be red, but I just don't like red because this means, well, it might mean I have an error, right? So I want to get to know the values of these, but I want to just show them in my program. I don't want to stop it. I just want them to be printed on the console, right? So I'll move this read key to the bottom so that when my program stops, I actually get all the output. And yeah, we tend to call everything that's printed on the console an output. Yeah, so I'm sorry. So we want to print out our integer value, float value, double value, and all that stuff, right? So again, I'll just say, okay, console write, right? And I'm using write. And oh yeah, let me just show you something more. Hello world. It's good to be here. Cool. Let's just move that up here. Yep. Cool. And we'll run our program. Now, what you notice here is that everything gets written like some in one line, right? Yeah, and at some point or from time to time, you just want to have this separated because it's like, okay, I want this like 2 lines, right? Okay, you can do this in 2 ways, right? First of all, you can use a method. Don't worry, it's another word that you'll learn. I'll be talking about methods later on. But you can use a method that is not called write, it's called write line. And what this actually does is just writes whatever you typed in and then goes back to the next line, right? So when I run this program, now I have the hello world, and then whatever I printed next goes into the next line, right? That's one way. Let's just Control Z this. So undo. The next way I can do this is I can put a special character there, which means, well, actually it's 2 characters for Windows, which means that I want a new line there. So what I say is /r, which means carriage return. I'll repeat, it's carriage return. And okay, what's a carriage? Do you see this blinking thing whenever we type, we have this blinking thing. This is the carriage. Now, if I move it to the left, that's a carriage return. I mean, it just moves to the beginning of the line, right? So whenever I say this character, or whenever I type this character, the carriage will return to the beginning. Oh, I hope this works. So let's just say ABC. I hope this works. Yes. Very good. So, yeah. You see what happened? So our carriage returned, deleted everything I wrote, and overwrote it with something else. Yeah, it's magic. Okay. But, okay, it's a carriage return, right? And then there is another special character called new line, right? And this makes it to go to the next line. So when we type this and run the program, that's what we get, right? Now, we could test this. I never tested it. Well, I know it works on Linux. We just get a /n. So we just want a new line. Okay, it works already. But in some versions of Windows it didn't work. And I know some text files need a carriage return. So now it works. Just to be sure Windows understands this, I take these two, right? And if you're working on Linux, the /r will not be a problem for anything. So this is, at least from my point of view, correct me if I'm wrong and put that in comments, please. It's a good practice to actually have both. Okay? Okay, and now coming back to getting actually some information out of our variables, right? So we want to have the integer value printed out, right? We didn't assign anything. We know it's 0 because we peeked in when we did the breakpoint. So let's just write it out. Okay, I'll write a line. It's easier than having this /r/n. Maybe, yeah. Okay, I'll copy the name. Is equal to, and now I'm going behind the string quotation marks because I want to concatenate to join two strings. Yeah. So I'll just add this integer value here, right? Like this, and yeah, it produces an error because yeah, and sometimes it does not produce an error, but it does produce an error now. Why? Well, okay, our program does have no clue how to do the addition of a string and oh, it's unknown. Oh, damn it. Okay, so we can't do this. Okay, too bad. So without debugging, you can't get to know what's the value. I didn't know that. That's weird. Okay, without debugging, you can't get to know what's the value of a variable that has been just declared. See, you learn something even when you teach people. Okay, but still, you might still want to present that value. So let's just assign something. Integer value. Okay, it was 15 at some point in our code. Great, now it works. I told you. Okay, so you can't actually get to know this value from just writing it out, but it has a value. Believe me, it does. Okay, so we have this, right? And then we have the read key here, so that we actually see the program running and it will stop at the end. Okay, so yeah, very nice. Should do one more thing. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, very nice. Okay, run. Okay. Yeah, that looks better. Way better. Okay, so our integer value is 15. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. So we can do that with any other value. So let's just copy paste this, and then we'll say float value here, float value here, right? Like this, and then have double value here, double value here. Very nice. Okay, copy, paste, string value here, and string value here. Alright, and the last one is character value here and character value here. Very nice. Of course, we need to assign those, and let me just do it quickly for you. Yeah, so I did some video magic and I assigned some variables to it. Okay, so let's run the program. It should be really nice. Cool. Okay, so we have our integer value equal to 15, float value, as I used to do that, 15.245, and yeah, this is Polish notation. It's just my original settings. I might change that so that you get some decent things, but it doesn't matter. But in programming, we use a dot here, right? So just bear with me. I'll probably change that at some point. Yep. So the float and the double are the same, and I'll show you the difference in probably a second. There is a display difference and stuff. Okay, we have the string value, which is just video magic, right? Yeah, and then we just have a single character A. Quite cool, right? Right. So let's just wrap up this video and figure out what we've learned. So first of all, we've learned a lot about the environment here, how to work with it. So we've learned how to create a new project. We've learned about our solution explorer, which is this thing, and that it holds well, many cool things, among which is our program, which is displayed on the left, right? We've learned how to debug. We've learned how to declare variables. We've learned what is a type. And we figured out more or less some basic types like int, float, double, string, and character. We've also created our first blueprint of an object. So we more or less know what a class is, but we'll get to know that way more in some later lessons. We created a person, first name, last name, gender, age. We didn't yet assign any values to it, but we'll do that in the second video. And we've learned how to display some information. So thank you for watching. I hope to get some comments on this. Please subscribe if you really want to. And no, I'm not getting any money from this. I'm just trying to make some more programmers so I can work with. So thank you for watching and have a good time. Bye.